Welcome back to my channel, everyone. My name is Brian. I also go by Mojo or Corn. And I am, if you've never been here before, a high school educator. I teach U.S. history and law, mainly to juniors and seniors. And I'm created this channel as a hopes to create a community to talk about issues in society. Obviously, I'm specifically talking about education in these videos, but hopefully in the future we can talk about other things and open up Discord as well as have a fun community, because I'll also play some games on here, and you'll see clips of that as well, because I'm also definitely a nerd when it comes to those things. But today, the purpose of today's video is it's going to be the second part of a three-part series going into the problems of education. The first part, if you haven't seen that video, goes into, I think, the most commonly heard issue or complaint from teachers, which is their pay not being equivalent to their responsibilities. If you want to watch that, which I highly recommend, there is a link in my channel as well as a link in the description below. Please go watch that. It should be pretty interesting for you. Today's video is going to address these topics that I think are lesser known or lesser heard from teachers, but are equally, if not sometimes more, contributory to the reason why we see a teacher shortage here. So the first one will be the kind of dichotomy or the differences I see between what students need from teachers, in my opinion, versus what outsiders want from teachers and to give to students, how they're very different from one another at times. And then the second is just a general, I think, misunderstanding of the teaching profession, what goes into it, which leads to excessive oversight and lack of respect for teachers. So we'll talk about that more generally, but the in-depth of today will be this first one. So again, if you haven't already, the first video covers all of these topics here. So if you're interested in that one, by all means, go check out the link in my description. Today, we're going to talk about these two things, though. What students need versus what outsiders want. So the first thing that students need, which should be pretty self-explanatory and might seem really common sense to you, is an adult to care about them. Many of my students don't have a teacher, a coach, a parent, anyone in their life really that they can look up to that cares about them in some parental figure aspect. It seems really self-explanatory to a lot of us, really duh to a lot of us, but I've also seen kind of horrifically in my time teaching that this is something a lot of students lack, that they may not have parents. They may have parents that are really not great role models for them and actually contribute more to the issues that they're having than helping them out. So a lot of times teachers or coaches are saddled with this responsibility. And so this is what just a student needs. A student, before they can even focus on learning, they need someone to care about them, to motivate them to learn. The second thing they need is they need more spaces to talk about things that actually they care about. My U.S. history students, for instance, I tell them all the time, I don't expect you to care about the railroads. I wouldn't if I were you. You need to find the things that you're passionate about and talk about those. And I actually offer spaces for my students to talk about those issues. And I think it's something that's unique about my class that I try to bring into more frequently. And I'm going to show you a few examples here today. Is what I call non-content related activities, because I'm not clever and frankly I can't think of a better name for it. So if you definitely have a better name for it, leave a comment. But I'll show you what those are today. So I think the biggest issue for young people today is mental health. We are experiencing one of the worst mental health epidemics amongst teenagers than we've ever seen in American history. And I think a large reason for that is education, specifically during and post-COVID. We haven't really come back from that. And so a way that I've allowed my students to talk about these things is through these activities. So usually once every 3 weeks or once a month, I will just spend a day and we'll just screw U.S. history. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to focus on what matters to you. So to give you an example of a couple of these, the first is a mental health workshop. So I generally give my students a Google form that they answer these questions. So had they personally struggled with their mental health? Did they know someone that struggled with their mental health? And did they have an adult at school that they felt comfortable talking about these things with? So just giving them statistics, giving them an overview of what that looks like amongst their peers, really just to show them that they aren't the only ones that are feeling this way or struggling. The part B is the bulk of this assignment, where we have a discussion over these 5 key things. So the first one is what do they think is contributing to these rates? A lot of them will say social media, school, pressure from parents and teachers, a very eye-opening discussion for them. The second would be, have you ever had a discussion with any teacher, coach, counselor, or other adult about mental health? I get about 50-50. 50 say no, the other half say yes. And they usually reference a teacher or coach. They usually don't reference a parent or a counselor. And I find that concerning, but onwards. Number 3, how does school contribute to your mental health? Positively, negatively, be specific. Most of the time it's negative. Almost all the time it's negative. I do have some students say that like it's like a mixture. That they say overall it's probably negative, but there are some positive things, like I get to be around my friends, I get to practice my sport or my club, or pursue some passions here, which is good to see, but definitely something to improve on. 4 is usually the hardest conversation to have, is why do you think heavy topics like suicide and self-harm aren't talked about more to teenagers? And then 5, in an age of mass connection, why do you think people feel lonely is at such a high level? So for number 4, I usually excuse students that don't want to talk about it, or never force them to speak up, because that is such a difficult topic. But it still offers a lot of insight, and they're really knowledgeable about these things, and they want to talk about them. And then in 5 is really addressing social media, hitting hard on the addiction to phones that I see in my classroom, and all teachers are seeing in their classrooms, I'm sure nationwide, but definitely within our school, and kind of talking to them about how in this age of mass connection are we feeling so lonely, and delving into how phones are really not that great for us, social media is really not that great for us, and it's really, really fun and engaging activity for them, and they get to talk about things that they care about that are affecting them personally. Really open. And then the last one, as I always like to do, is end it on a more optimistic angle, as we talk about things that we can do better going forward. So how can this generation improve upon the failures of their parents, and address these issues to make sure that our children and our children's children don't feel the same way. So just generally we address those. How specifically can schools better equip them? And then I give them opportunity to write about the thing that brings them the most joy. So something that gets them out of bed in the morning, something that allows them, some happiness, because a lot of this is talking about like the crummy parts of life. And so I want to offer a space for them to do so. And this is, for me as an educator, if you're a teacher out there and you're like, oh, this looks fun, this is the most fun part for me. I do read part B and the other parts of part C, but we talk about all those. This I never talk about in class. I allow them to just write, and then I read them, because it's really fun for me and enjoying, or like worthwhile for me, fulfilling for me to see what brings them joy outside the classroom, to get to know them more personally. So that's always really good. It's really hard discussion at times, but they're always willing to do it and do a great job of it. Other ones that I do, I'm going in as depth on. The first is called The Killer of Creativity. We watched this video about how schools are actually squandering children's capabilities, and we do that progressively throughout K through 12, or their creativity, not capabilities, but creativity, where like we put them into a block, right, where now they're required to take X course, all throughout high school. They're not allowed to pursue as many passions or electives, and arts and humanities aren't as emphasized, where science and maths are, and that seems to be like a worldwide approach, not just a US thing. So it's very interesting. It's a TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson. Highly recommend it. Really fun to do, but I usually start the semester. This is probably the first one we do, because it gets them going, gets them talking, and it gets them, we talk about like volunteering in class and how that can be scary, and how people are fearful of being wrong, when being wrong is actually a great thing. And so it allows them to express things, get them interested, but also for me personally as a teacher, gets them engaged in my classroom, that they're more willing to open up and discuss things, but even when we start transitioning to talking about things related to content. And then, of course, I always end it with things that they can talk about, to vent about, to things that get, things off their chest that help them, talk about things that matter to them. And then finally, this is more future-based, which is what I talked about, or point out here, their future. A lot of them, the biggest stressor for them in life is they don't know what they're doing, especially for me as juniors and seniors. Obviously, this will change on an age a person teaches, but for me as juniors and seniors who are looking towards that next step, whether that be our college, military, the career field, whatever, they don't know what they're doing, and that stresses them out. So we actually do spend 20 minutes taking the 16 personalities test. Super fun test. Highly recommend it. And everyone take it. Breaking that down, giving them like career possibilities, strengths and weaknesses. What do they, finding a famous person that has the same personalities and things like that. And then we spend time talking about their dreams and aspirations. What do they want to achieve? And this was the thing that really stuck out to me when I started teaching this lesson in particular. They don't know their dreams. They don't get spaces and times to take just focused, concentrated time to figure out their future. To think like, oh, what do I want to do, right? Do I want to get married? Do I want to move to a different country? Do I want to become the best doctor or best lawyer or best teacher? Or do I want to be a part of the military? Like, they don't get time or spaces to do this, but it's so worthwhile, and it's so rewarding to see this and like see the connections they make, and to talk about these. We actually talk about all of number 2, and going into like hearing like other people's dreams and stuff. And we create a board in my classroom on like, people's dreams and all these dreams that are listed across all, 6 of my classes. And it's really cool that people be like, oh, like who else like has the same dream as I do? And it creates these connections for them. This is where I find the most engagement. This is where I find the most fun from my students, that they seem to be 100% focused. This is when I see the fewest phones out. These are the things that matter to them. This is what they need more of. They don't need more U.S. history. They need more of these activities to figure out who they are and what role they want to play in the future. And that's something a space that I try to create for them, but I know a lot of times students don't have that space. So that talks about number 2 really in depthly. Third one, ways to engage students way to engage with subjects that interest them. This just means I think that there should be more electives. We'll address this more when it comes to the problems, but students need fewer required courses and more electives. They should be able to take more arts or humanities or construction courses or engineering courses or law for me, right? I teach law. And it's something that I think is very not prioritized is like you take English, you take math, you take Gov and Econ when you're a senior, you take certain sciences that are required. You don't get a lot of wiggle room with your schedule. And I think that high school should be preparing students for the future, right? And if we allowed a more exploratory field where you could be like, oh, maybe I want to be an engineer. I can take an engineering class, an intro to engineering class in high school. Or maybe I want to go in construction, and we have those opportunities for them there. Let them figure out what they like and don't like in high school. Because we don't want kids going into the workforce or going into college and being like, oh God, I never got exposure to this. I just thought I would like it and actually hate it. And having to switch majors or switch careers or like leave the workforce, go back to college a year or two late, and now they're like really scrambling and behind. High school should be a place to experiment and to figure out who they are. And we don't allow that because we have so many rigid schedules and courses that, they need to take X, Y, and Z. They need to get this many credits before they graduate. Chill. Their kids are going to grow. They're going to learn. And I think allowing more electives would be great. And then less pressure put on grades, more emphasis put on discovering who they are. This ties into everything else I've already talked about. That statistics, the fact that the emphasis is put on the statistic in the grade book rather than who they are. That a student that goes from 20% to 60% in my class versus a student that, goes from 90 to 92, they're not as impressive even though they're going to get the better grade, right? Growth is more important to me. Proficiency is good. And those people that get consistent A's are awesome and they should be, praised for that. But I also equally, people should be praised for the ones that climb that mountain or get part of the way up that mountain during the year. Now, this is all well and good. This sounds super rosy and beautiful. This is what we actually get, because this is what outsiders, and by outsiders, I define that as admin, school board, politicians, parents, people that aren't in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. The number one is the most annoying, most frustrating for teachers, data. This emphasis put on statistics, these, boiling down this complex individual that we just spent this entire time, highlighting their uniquenesses in, putting them into a number, right? Putting them into a slot and like, oh, okay, they got 75% mastery. Gross. But it's what we emphasize because we like to compare teachers. We like to make sure that they're doing their jobs, which, how is this their job? Not for me to say, but I don't think that this is the best way to measure teachers' ability. And it's gross. And it leads to these things: extreme oversight on students and teachers. The fact that they want data is to see really what's being taught, how's it being taught, how are students learning? Because I think that there's this perception that if you get 95% on a U.S. history test, then you're capable and you're ready to go to college or you're ready to go to the workforce, which just in reality, you're better at regurgitating knowledge. The structure of U.S. history sucks. And it's just, memorize, regurgitate, forget, repeat. And it's not showing a human that's ready to do anything other than memorize things. So extreme oversight on students and teachers, feeling this pressure, feeling this like you have Big Brother watching you at all times. Teachers always feel that way, especially when they have to plug data into certain databases that compare them against one another, like we have in my school. Teachers need to be robotic purveyors of knowledge. They need to be apolitical, unopinionated, nothing, right? I am not Brian when I enter the classroom. I am this robot, Mr. C, where you walk in and you are meant to just give your information out. That is not what I think that I should be. I think that every teacher should be able to insert not super in-depth their opinions in the classroom, but if you allow students or teachers to do this, students are going to have a variety of teachers in their classrooms, right? My peers, my colleagues at work are very different than I am, right? And students feel the same way about this. We've had this discussion whether teachers should be unbiased or never offer their opinions in classes, and students think that that's stupid. They think that teachers should be able to be honest and reflecting of who they are. And that would allow them to be exposed to more things, right? Whether you come from a very conservative rural school and you have a liberal teacher, or the inverse, right? You're living downtown Manhattan and you have a more conservative teacher. It allows students to be exposed to different perspectives, different backgrounds, and it's from reliable sources, more maybe educated sources. And this is also just taxing on teachers. This isn't just like for students, but like teachers to walk in and just like shed who they are at the doorstep is very difficult emotionally and mentally every single day. We do it because we fear the backlash if we don't, but it's very, very taxing on us. So it's not only bad for students in that they get a very, robotic perspective of the world, but it's also bad for teachers because it takes a part of who they are away. And then finally, students to take subjects that are important, not ones that are elective. This goes into the have more elective courses, right? Sure, have 2 to 3 maybe required courses a year, but most of them in their schedule should be elective. They should be able to prioritize those things. They should be able to find what works for them and what interests them. And right now we don't do that for them. So this is a big issue overall that I see in schools. And the last one was just lack of respect, I suppose, right? We've already talked about the second one. I think teaching is just misunderstood because I think that what people look at, and then what I looked at before I got into teaching, was just like the teaching U.S. history part, right? Standing in front of a whiteboard or a projector and going through a PowerPoint or coming up with a worksheet or a project or whatever. And that's a part of my job, but it's a very, very small part of my job. I'd say it's sub 20% of my job. So people don't get the whole picture, and I think that leads to a lack of respect because they see the break schedule, they see that this is like, oh, maybe I could do this and sit in front of PowerPoint. It's tougher than you think. And it leads to the fact that lack of respect then leads to the other issues that we see. The excessive oversight comes from the fact that we don't respect these professionals. I gave the example in the first video that you don't go to the doctor when you get a shot and tell the nurse, oh, that's not where you put the needle. You put it actually here, because we trust them. We respect them. They're knowledgeable people. Don't see the same with teachers. We need to be like overseeing everything they do, monitoring how people are, students are growing, how teachers are doing, competing against one another, because we don't respect educators. We don't see them as educated professionals doing a job. We see them as people just like babysitting our children, and we need to monitor them. So overall, these two things I think really contribute to teaching and the lack of teachers that we see today. There's estimated 300,000 opening positions that people just aren't filling because no one wants to join this profession. And these are 3 things that contribute to that. In the next video, we'll talk about the more political side, the underfunding of schools, and how that contributes to this pressure put on teachers. Why are we underfunding schools? Why are schools not prioritized when it comes to the budgets in states and then in the national government? We'll talk about that. And then in the next series, we'll talk about these things that go into some solutions for teachers, which you can see, and they can obviously, I'm teasing now, but you can get into more depth in those videos later. As always, if you are interested and you want more information on these things, or want to keep up with this series, like, subscribe, please. If you are a fellow educator and you see similar things or want to offer other insights or have questions, write a comment. If you're someone that has no idea about most of the stuff in teaching, but has questions, do that. And if it's a really hard question to answer in depth in the comments, I'll be sure to include you in a future video in that comment there. So by all means, I want this to be a collaborative, cooperative experience and not just, me preaching as I often do in class. So please leave, comment, subscribe, and if you're interested, keep following along. Thanks, guys.